you and those like you.
And likewise to you, I see
Yeah,
the same.
yeah, I'm sure, we're in the same. You're probably hanging out in other realms with me right now. It would be my presumption from my own experiences is that these beings there's a little bit of an alert going on here, and people that are available, beings that are available, that are in love with life, are coming here to serve. I had an experience a very long time ago with mushrooms where I was asked if I would share my life with plant spirits, and that the more often I could get there to do it, the better off the planet would be. And it wasn't just my job, it's a lot of people's jobs. And that we used to do that naturally, and almost all cultures were shamanic. Almost all cultures had ways to reach their sacred, realm, the supernatural, if we call it in our kind of primitive cartoon world. I just read a wonderful little article in Reality Sandwich, I'll give them a plug, by somebody I don't know yet. And the article's wonderful because it makes this argument very convincingly. It's very Robert Anton Wilson, that there's all these references to using the acacia tree in Freemasonry and in old Masonic rituals and documents. He shows all these very direct references to using acacia as a way to go to the celestial realms. Well, acacia mixed with other things is a pretty close approximation to ayahuasca, which he points out very deliberately. And about this other thing about understanding the alchemical angle of being part mineral, and that when you can refine this mineral by scraping the skins off of these acacia roots, you have this alchemical description of this process, and eventually you are able to extract this pure chemical, not chemical, mineral. Chemical's a little bit funky sounding in today's world. But a natural occurring mineral that is extracted, which is the DMT, and mix it with possibly Syrian rue or other possible things in the area. And suddenly you have at the root of Western culture a very important psychedelic source, rather than this kind of presumption that the West had very few psychedelics and had very little experience with it. It's probably been very important to the West, like it has to the native people that have survived the apocalypse. It's obviously important to them. I think it's been important to us all along. One thing I like to do is go into old masters' paintings and look for traces of mushroom-type shapes, and specifically allegorical-type paintings that could be about mystery-type revelatory states. And if there's not a mushroom shape that's convincing enough, I like to go in and Photoshop and add white dots onto the red robes of a cardinal or a bishop or something, and create references to Amanita in classical artwork that may or may not be valid. To me, it's part of the story is that it's all mixable. It's very sculptable, and having fun with it's important, but also just putting the idea in somebody's mind.
Yeah. Do you think that Amanita played a bigger part in the past?
Yeah.
It seems like nobody I know ever takes it, and it seems quite precarious and difficult to get the right dosage.
Yeah, I've always been reticent and pretty much had it on the banish list for myself, but I met two really brilliant men in Berkeley that stumbled into a lot of it near where they lived and decided to check it out, and now they were using it as their primary plant ally. And they would just chew a piece of it, the properly dehydrated stuff, or they made brownies with it, they did tea with it, they drank each other's urine and would pass it 3 or 4 times back and forth to get really potentized stuff. And they never had any bad experiences with it, and they had all these incredible experiences to tell of empowerment and strength, and also being in a state of godly awareness of who you are as an individual and the relationship between the individual and the divine. Still, I wasn't interested in trying any because I know all the other stories.
Yeah, seems like it's got a lot of... It's depicted in so much art Wasson said it was possibly what they were using in the Soma, in the Lucia Mysteries, and Eleusis. And to me, it's almost like as if it was. I have a suspicion that maybe that is a distraction. That to send people off in that direction is not necessarily. It might have been disinformation.
Yeah, I don't think so, though, personally, because I had a reason to study the Sami. Excuse me, I'll repeat that. Let me clear my throat. I had some motivation to study the Sami traditions in Scandinavia, the shamanic traditions around what people call the Laplanders and the people that herd reindeer and stuff. And they have a very long and ancient tradition of feeding amanita to the reindeer, and then drinking their urine. It's among other ways of doing it, but that's part of their ritual. And I think it's more, I like the idea that I think it was, gosh, I forget which, it's not Robert Anton Wilson, but I think the guy that wrote Temporary Autonomous Zones, his name will come back to me, he's a very important guy, but there's this notion of the soma function, which I'm more attracted to. I think that the human spirit wants to commune with the plant realm through these plant teachers, and the ones that are around are the ones you use. And that some of them are crazy dangerous, like Jimson weed and Datura and stuff. People can have a lot of really awful time on that. But I know that I've known personal friends that have done them even though they know they're dangerous. I don't feel that call. I'm pretty much a coward when it comes to edgier things. This said, I had a visitor from Amsterdam this solstice, and she spoke a lot about her friends that were doing nightshades and amanita and belladonna, mandrake. And we got into the same discussion about my impression of them is that I have a lot of reservation about them. I'm not that interested in exploring them, but I'm interested in people's reports. And she goes, well, there's a lot of people in Europe that are interested in the witchcraft side of this that are psychedelic pagans, and that they grow their own, make their own ointments and salves. And she offered me some. She had some different things to try, and I was not interested in first, but after we spent a couple of days hanging out and it was a background topic, I decided to try some salve and see if there was anything that I could notice from a small introduction. And then she had some incense that we inhaled for a while that was made out of amanita. And I smelled some other substances. I noticed that all of them had this kind of sweetness to them, the smell, but it was also sort of a funereal sweetness, a kind of smell I associated with flowers at funerals that I'd been to. And it kind of puzzled me. And then I started thinking about the goth and the goth subculture and how they kind of see death as sexy and how they have this glamour around death. And we started telling funny stories about goth people we knew, and she showed me a bunch of pictures of her friends doing death photos where they get all dressed up in death makeup and then stare into their own camera as though they're dead. And then the next picture they're laughing real hard, And what an interesting fascination I'd noticed intellectually, but I'd never ever had any of that impulse in me. And that night, I laid in front of the fire, and I was in this very seductive space that felt erotic. Not sexual. I didn't want to fuck something. I just felt that it was this erotic, seductive state, and that it had something to do with accepting death and as a lover. And that I'd never sensed that in myself at all. And it woke it up in me a little, and I saw the comic books Sandman differently, and saw my whole, I've had a whole group of friends that are really into goth stuff. It's never been part of my life. And so that was a really gentle introduction to it, and I felt like I got why it was seductive, but I'm not sure I'd ever go there again.
Mm-hmm. Delusional, they call them. Is that what they call them?
Delusionals?
Delusionals.
That's a good name, yeah.
Delusions, another word, deliriums?
There are deliriums, yeah.
Deliriums?
deliriums. And I haven't had much experience with opium, but I loved opium and felt that it was so seductive that if it was around, it would absolutely be a problem for me.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I could...
A lot of people have been in the past.
Yeah, I could see that, just wanting to lay on a bench and smoke this stuff and curl up into these incredibly sexy escape fantasies. And that's not what psychedelics are. No. Psychedelics confront me with reality. They don't like only seduce me, which it does do, but it also makes me deal with my own responsibilities toward my own reality. Mm-hmm. The squirrel drops that little pine cone on my head.
Yeah.
So I've got a plant story about ayahuasca. I only have one serious ayahuasca tale that I think is worth sharing, and it was an experience that was very difficult for me. It lasted literally nearly 24 hours of being engaged with a non-ordinary kind of 1 foot in the ayahuasca world and 1 foot back around the fireplace and the fire pit. And it was a night of incredible struggle and pain and near-death experiences. I died more than once to my human form, and I went through periods where mythic beings of light fibers of different shapes and seemingly of different types were taking apart my life body and removing dangerous clusters of fear and pain and shame and guilt. And I could see what was going on and I could sense it, but it was so overwhelming that I would lose consciousness, and it was so painful and terrifying that there were many times where I felt frustrated that I had been reborn. I felt this sense of an exhaustion as a human being that I was very willing to just let it go and to move on into the light field and have it been done. And the people with me, and I was sitting with an established, well-known shaman, ayahuasquero that many people know, and surrounded with very experienced, very dear friends that helped me through it and sat with me, and it was very demanding, and it addressed a lot of pain that I had to do with very real life, this world, this biography, this lifetime damage that I was trying to address. Late the next day, after I went home, I went inside. The house was empty. I started drawing a bath, and I took 2 puffs of marijuana, of cannabis, and I hadn't smoked in several days because I had been doing my dieta and not smoking or drinking alcohol or salt or fermented food and those sort of things that you do to prepare for ayahuasca. And I had been so toxic and nauseous and bent over for 24 hours that I just wanted to get in a hot tub and smoke some pot, smoke some sacred herb. And as soon as I took that second puff, I felt this toxicity just melt out of my body, like I could feel it literally like flowing downward in my body toward the ground and draining into the ground. And I was shifting back into the ayahuasca world after having finally kind of come down to grounding enough to get in a tub of water. So I found my way to my bedroom, got in bed, got comfortable on my pillow, and started to do some deep breathing. And before I could really get past the first breath, I was back in a full-on visionary state. And the only other being in there with me was this very large jaguar. and it was sitting a few feet away from me and staring in my eyes. And at first it looked like a 3D version of a Japanese